There we go. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. So today's class, we're going to be doing the uh, Realist tax system. This is just going to be a basic usage class. There's a lot to it though, so we're going to try and make sure that we've got all the basics covered and get everybody introduced to the most essential elements of Realist. Before we get into that, I wanted to run through just some basics about the webinars and how they function. So first things first, you guys are going to be starting on mute by default. There is a Q&A button down at the very bottom of the screen. If you have any questions, please focus all of your questions into that little space. Just so you guys are aware, the Q&A function actually does give me a little notification letting me know that there's a new question in there. If you guys post a question into the chat section, though, it might not make it quite so obvious to me. But I've got both of those screens open, so either way, hopefully we can help you out. But we are going to be doing a recording of the class. I'll send that out as soon as the class is over. And I also wanted to let you guys know if you have any audio or video issues during the course at all, let me know. Chat, Q&A, I really don't care. If there's a problem, we want to make sure that we're getting that corrected as quickly as possible. Now, the class for Realist today is not for CE. We do have a rules and regs class that's after this. That's going to be the class that has some CE credit attached to it. But we'll go ahead and get started. Oh, actually, the buttons. Almost forgot. So the buttons down at the bottom of your screen, again, Q&A for any questions that you have, chat for any commentary, stories, anecdotes, whatever you want to comment. And then any time you guys need to ask a question with your voice, since this is a 2-hour-long class, I figure we might as well open up the chat channel a little bit more. If you guys would like to say something or ask a question with your voice, you can hit that raise hand button to let me know. So if it's a little bit cumbersome to ask your question, maybe it's something that's going to take a minute to explain or requires some nuance or whatever the case may be, you guys can hit that raise hand button. Now, also, if you guys are joining us on a mobile device, iPad, iPhone, some kind of tablet or phone of some kind, just remember those buttons. Again, raise hand if you guys would like to ask a question with your voice. All right. Looks like everybody that was hoping to be here is. Let me minimize this out of the way. And I think we should be set. Let's get that split back and should be good to go. Oh, and actually, you know what? Let's make this just a little bit bigger. And by the way, just in case anybody's having some trouble seeing what we're putting up on the screen, just let me know. We have had some issues with that in the past, and it's always kind of unfortunate. Just because we don't really have too much in the way of space. All right, let's do it. So first things first, if you guys are trying to get into Realist, when you first get signed into mlstechnology.com, which is where you guys should be going to get signed into the MLS, go to mlstechnology.com, and there's going to be a nice big link here for Realist. For those of you guys who have kind of gotten used to just starting your day with getting into Matrix and then not really navigating too much beyond that, there's the external links over here on the right that effectively used to be the exact same thing that we used our homepage for. There's a bunch of links down there for some of the other apps that we allow you guys access to. But up at the top is where we've actually placed the Realist tax link. So if you guys are hoping to just dive directly into Realist, there's that Realist tax link up at the top. And it also happens to be that if you're looking at a listing in Matrix, you'll have the tax information brought over directly from Realist. It'll appear on this tax tab. You're looking at the listing information. And there's also going to be 3 buttons underneath the photo that allow you to get in either to the Realist tax information, just the generic stuff, which is identical to what that tax tab provides. There's also a Realist map, which will bring you to the location of where this particular property is on the map in Realist. And then there's also a neighborhood option, which I believe is actually obsolete. It used to provide a very different look, but it's, oh, they did fix it. Excellent. So, but we're going to be covering all of those little parts and pieces in a bit here. But that's about it for how to get into Realist. Now, if you do click on the link to either get in from either the MLS portal or from the top of Matrix, where there's that Realist tax button, it's going to land you on a homepage that looks like this. Now, a couple things to mention when you guys first get signed in to Realist. Over on the left-hand side, you're going to notice that this actually starts us off with what's called a quick search. Now, quick search only has a couple different things that you can search by. Most of our class today, we're going to be spending in the My Search section. It also has it split off where we have the map up here at the top, and our search results will appear down at the bottom. This is called the split view. We're going to be discussing the map and the list view a little bit later. Now, before we actually start running any searches or doing anything with the map or finding any of our results, we need to make sure that we're searching in the correct county. Up at the top left corner, notice here it says multiple counties. Zooming in and out, it's not going to make a change to that, is it? Okay. Multiple counties selected is what it's trying to say. So at the moment, I've got Creek, Rogers, and Tulsa County. You notice those recording dates underneath. If we click on Change County, it's going to pull up the list of all of the counties that we have available for searching within Realist. Now, this is all 77 counties in Oklahoma, as well as the 7 neighboring counties over in Arkansas. One notable thing with this is just that there is actually a Washington County that's right across the border in Arkansas, and there's also a Washington County in Oklahoma, which is where Bartlesville is. If you guys are trying to search for it, when you first land on this page under the all states, make sure that you guys are noticing what the state is after, because the first one is actually going to be the Washington, Arkansas. But on this list, whenever we check the checkbox, you'll notice that that actually adds the county that we just checked over here to the right. So this is kind of a layout that we're going to see a lot in Realist. We've got the categories over here on the left. We've got some checkboxes in the middle. And then whatever we actually check here will appear over here on the right under selected whatever. So in this case, it's selected counties. Sometimes it's search results. So we're looking at selected attributes or selected results or whatever. So this layout is going to be something that we see over and over again. One of the important things to notice about this is that if you want to get rid of something, you can either uncheck it from here, or you can hit this little X over here to the right. If there's any arrangement that's available, you guys can actually rearrange these. So like if I wanted to put Tulsa on top and Rogers on the bottom, you can rearrange those. That'll come in to play a little bit later as well, especially when we're searching for extra attributes to search by, things like that. Now, we mentioned that when we were looking at the multiple counties selected earlier, it showed us all of the counties that we had checked, which is the same list right here, but it had a recording date. Now, the recording date that we're seeing here is actually the last time that we got fresh information from that particular county. So if you guys are ever wondering, oh, well, is this actually the most recent information? Is this up to date? Blah, blah, blah. Not to worry. If you guys get in here and you see the recording date, which you can do either by clicking on that change county or again, holding your cursor over the multiple counties selected, it'll show you what the recording date was so that you can quickly ascertain whether or not this information that you might be looking for is relevant or fresh or recent. So if we par this down just to one county, just so you guys are aware, it actually does show us the, slowly but surely, it does show us the county. So instead of saying multiple counties selected, it'll just show that one. but again, we still have to hold our cursor over it to see what the recording date was. We still will occasionally get calls about this, so I might as well just ring this bell one more time. If you guys do end up in a situation where you're trying to track down tax record information and you find the information, but it's not containing what you're looking for, maybe it was a recent transaction that you guys are trying to find or something like that. Again, just double check what the fresh date was. So the recording date on here, that's when we last got fresh data from that county. One of the cool things that I learned recently actually is that all of the county assessors' offices are moving to the same piece of software in Oklahoma. So it used to be that we would actually have counties that, I mean, they would very, very infrequently update their data. Like every 6 months was, I think, the worst that I saw. There were some that would just fall further behind, but it wasn't on a schedule. Like sometimes they'd update it, a month ago, and then they wouldn't update it for a year or something like that. But it always depended on how much activity there really was. But now that everybody's moving to the same system, it seems like there's going to be a lot more consistent updates to things. So hopefully the data that you guys are seeing in Realist is just going to improve as time goes on. But next, let's talk about the, give me just a second here. That's where that was coming from. I apologize. There was a, there we go. There was a notification sound that was popping up and I was like, that's not supposed to be happening. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's now talk about our search functions. So I mentioned before that we have the quick search and my search. So whenever we're trying to run a search, there's the quick search, which is actually a system default. Interestingly enough, this is actually the same look that's going to appear in every version of Realist, no matter where you go. So even if you guys end up switching to a completely different MLS or a different association or leaving the state, if you guys are still going to find yourself using Realist, this quick search function is going to be there available for you. So let's cover some of the basics on this one. When you guys get into the quick search, it's got an address search where you can just type out the address the same way that you would if you were typing out an address into your search function on your phone or filling out an envelope or something like that. Just put in the address, the basic parts, 25 South Sandusky Avenue. And you'll notice down here at the very bottom, just like we have in Matrix, whenever you type in any information, it'll show you a live count of the results down here at the bottom. So for instance, without even adding in what the city, state, zip code is, I've got 5125 South Sandusky Avenue, and I've already got one match. Now there's a couple different ways that the matches will appear down here at the bottom. So for instance, if I end up doing, let's try Smith. Again, I'm looking only within Tulsa County, and I've got 2,300 matches. If I end up hitting search when I have tons and tons of results, it's going to give me a little prompt asking me, all right, we've got way too many results. How many would you like to see at the moment? So we can do show first 1,000. Maybe I can go back and refine my search just a little bit. We'll talk about those other options later. But whenever you end up running that search, it's going to fill up the list and put a bunch of dots on the map. So if we hit search, there's a little kind of contingency if we have too many results. But once you actually get your results, again, it fills up the map with all the dots. It shows us all the results down here. And then if we select one, it kind of zooms you over to that area. Or if you select one from the map, it'll zoom you down on the list to where that one is. Now, another way that this might appear, so instead of just filling up our map, showing all of the reports down here, what may end up happening is that you type in the address that's just one that you're looking for. And when it shows just one match, Instead of putting us with this map up here and the results here, as soon as I hit search, it immediately loads the report for this particular property. So it doesn't bother with trying to show it on the map. In fact, down here at the very bottom, we even have the map itself, but it just goes directly into that search result. So the idea is just that if you have if you have a specific property that you're interested in, instead of having to make you go through the rigmarole of clicking on this or clicking on this, or loading the reports, whatever the case may be, if you have one property that you're searching for, you hit search, immediately jumps into the report. Now, the address and the owner name, both are kind of basic searches. We do have a little drop down up here that says is, starts with, or includes. Now we can search with a couple basic elements of this. So like is means I need to type it out exactly the way that the address is. And if it does not have the information exactly correct, it won't find a match. The starts with option, which is the default that it actually opened Realist with, is actually the best option. That's one that I would recommend that you guys use. And there is also an include option that was a recent addition. You guys can explore that if you would like, but give me just a second. There we go. Sorry about that. This weather recently has really been wreaking havoc on my sinuses, but hopefully it's not noticeable. Anyway, the drop down here for owner name has the similar options. We've got is, starts with, or includes. Now the is one, again, this is going to be looking for a very specific set of data. So if you have something that's wrong, like for instance, right here, we've got Taylor Michael Stephen. Guys, apparently this owner has 3 first names. But just so you guys are aware, if I was searching for his name and I typed in his first and last name in first and last order, where we've got Michael Taylor, if I have it on is, it'll find it immediately. If I have it on is, but it's actually been rearranged by the county so that it's last name, first, middle, well, that's going to be a problem because then I won't be able to find it. Now the include one, so let's say if I just did Michael, for instance, now we're going to be finding tons and tons of results. I got 10,000 matches because include is going to find any time the name Michael is included in the owner name at all. So that could be a little bit troublesome, but the starts with option is always the best choice, in my opinion. Notice how it flipped over from including it was 10,000 plus results. Switching it over to starts with, it's down to 100 matches. Now there's a couple other options in here. We've got the MLS number. Now this is when you guys just have your MLS number already in hand. If you guys haven't caught on, the quick search function for the most part is really going to be when you have all of the information that you need already, you don't have all the information you need, but if you have the information to do your search, you can just dive right in, put in the address, put in the listing number, the tax reference number, tax ID, account number, whatever they call it in that particular county. But if you have that information in hand already, you can just dump it in there and dive directly into the result. Now, if you don't, that's when we get to this My Search function. So the My Search function is actually where we're going to have some customization that we can do. I'm going to zoom us out just a little bit. Let's see if this is, yeah, it's still zoomed in just a little bit. Good. When we get over to the My Search section, this is where we're going to have some saved search options, and there's going to be a huge variety of different things that we can search by for the search results that we're looking for. So again, if we don't have the exact information in hand ready to go, we can go into the My Search section and start putting together maybe subdivision searches or owner name searches, address searches. We've even got a section down here at the bottom for township range and section. So especially handy if you guys have any vacant land that you're working with. But let's talk quickly about the saved searches. So up here at the top, we've got the drop down for saved searches, just simply says select. This list is going to be filled with any of the searches that you guys have saved over time. Now, at the moment, I have a bunch that I've saved. You can see when it was that I created them or modified them last. But at the very bottom of this list, and if you guys haven't added any saved searches in the past, this is all that's going to be on the list. We're going to find our general query, our foreclosure query, and then you may even have a My Search default, depending on how long you guys have been with the MLS. Now, the general query is the one that we're going to be using today. The general query is actually going to contain effectively kind of a pulled collection of attributes, search criteria. What that means is just that they went through and they asked a bunch of people what it was that they were most commonly using and what they were searching for. And this is the collection that they came up with. So the owner name, the house number, the street name, street suffix, which is actually going to be if you guys have avenue, boulevard, et cetera, just remember that when we're referring to it as street suffix instead of street type, what it's literally looking for is like BLVD, avenue, street, road, that kind of stuff. Just so you guys are aware, and I'm going to bring my keyboard close so you guys can hear this, but that's it. No extra characters. It's only ever going to be 4. So just remember that this is actually the acronym or the shortened version, the truncated version of the word. So BLVD for boulevard, etc. That's the one that I always use to remember it by. I don't know. It's just since that's the only one that's really that common to have 4 letters. Anyway, we've got a subdivision search. I really like the way the subdivision search works in this. When you click on this select from list option, why do we not have any values? Oh, because we still had a search here. I was doing this to me the other day too. Let's switch over to the foreclosure query and then back again. And I was on the cusp of trying to report this and decided against it because I thought it was my computer. Hey, okay, refreshing the web page fixed it. The subdivision search is actually fairly simple. When you click on that list, you've got start typing for a search. So I mentioned before that we have typically the checkboxes over here to the left and then what we've selected over to the right. But since we're doing a search for something that's a little bit broader than something that can be categorized or anything like that, we don't have a categories section over here. Instead, we have a search function up here at the top. So this is where we can actually go through, let's say we wanted to find all of Minchell Park, for instance. Type in Minchell Park, we can find the original ones, and we can do all of the resubs that they have. And then this looks like it's part of Minchell Park 2. There we go, apply. This shows down here at the bottom my live matches. So when I hit search, I should see a big clump, big square of all of my results. There we go. So if we end up wanting to get rid of any of the subdivisions that we found, we can either go back to the list where we can see all of them over here, just hit the X's. We can hit clear selection down at the bottom. And there's also the little trash cans on here as well, so we can get rid of those if you would like. Perfect. Now, anytime you guys have run a search, whether you've done it on the quick search or my search, there is a button down here at the bottom that says clear all. So after I've run my search and I've got my results either in the list or the map or both, I can hit clear all to just get rid of all of that. And then it's also going to clear out any of my search criteria as well. Now, this is different than when we get in here and we do a search for, let's say, Turtle Creek. Go, Turtle Creek, apply, search, finds all the Turtle Creek listings or properties, excuse me. But if I hit clear all, this is actually clearing the subdivision as well as the search results. So it's important to recognize that the clear from down here is just getting rid of my specific subdivision. The clear all is actually getting rid of the subdivision and the results itself. All right. A little further down, we have the city. One of the things that I really like about the city option is that when it finds it, oh, is it not doing it anymore? Come on. I'm spelling you follow, right? Aren't I? Oh, I'm in the wrong county. Come on, Mike. Let's try that again. There we go. Well, it used to. Was it the county? No, it couldn't have been. Oh, I'm I'm sorry. This is me mixing up something with Matrix. When you guys are running a search in Matrix, there is an autofill, and I'm thinking of it for the county, not the city. Anyway, um, clear that out. But if you guys do end up wanting to search for multiple cities, city as well as the owner name and even some of these others, house number, street name, etc., you notice how there's this little plus button on there. So if we wanted to do a search that was specifically going to be Bixby plus, did Broken Arrow plus Sepulpa plus, and you notice we have a search that combines all of those together. So it'll be combining all of those searches into one, including all of these different cities. Again, the same thing can be done for the owner name. If you guys had a couple different house numbers that were on the same street, you can do it that way. There's the street suffix. So if you guys wanted to make sure that you weren't getting locked out because you had something that was on an avenue or street, leaving it blank is usually the better option. And then further down, we have our township range section. The township range and section, just so you guys are aware, again, just like we had with the street suffix, it only allows for a certain number of characters. So you're not going to be able to actually get in 19 and then the word north. It'll just have to be 19N. So, but let's clear all of that out. Let's actually start running a search to look for a specific property. So up here at the top, I've got our house number in here. So the house number is going to have a little drop down here that allows us to do either a different range above or below a certain number. So if I click on this drop down here, it says is between, is greater than, or is less than. Now, if we do this is between option, let's say that I wanted to do between 1500 and 1600 on Peoria. Now, when I run my search, it's going to be showing me some matches from both North and South Peoria. Now, what this means is that I may need to actually start adding in some specific extras onto my search, but we're going to be talking about customizing the search a little bit later. We do also have the option to draw on the map, which we'll be discussing later as well. But if you guys do end up in a situation where you're needing to add a little bit more nuance to a search, you guys can click on those drop downs to find out what else they have available to you. So even beyond just running a search that has a specific number and then you put in a plus, and then we'll do 1600. Just remember that there's also the drop down here. Yeah, that was the other thing to mention. All right. So next, let's jump into a specific property report. So in this case, I'm going to do the 5125 that we did earlier, and Sandusky for the street name. So run the search. And again, since we found just simply one result, it's going to dive us directly into the properties report. Now, this is the ultimate goal of any searches that we're doing in Realist. When you guys are trying to track down tax record information, opening up the report is going to show you the information that you were looking for. So in our case, I've got a property here in Tulsa County. You'll notice up here at the top, it has our address. This is the address with the full street address, the city, the state, the zip with the +4, and then also shows the county. I'll be honest, anytime I'm actually trying to get some assistance with something, this is the same format that I'll typically send it off in. So for instance, if somebody is having issues with a report or issues with a specific property that they pulled up, maybe it hasn't been updated in a while or whatever the case may be, this is what I'm going to be sending off to people. Next section down is going to go over some of the basic information about the property. This is where we'll find a photo of the property that's come directly over from Matrix. So a listing agent maybe had this property listed, uploaded some photos for the property. That's where this photo will appear. Now there's a lot of cross-pollination of information between Matrix and Realist. And we'll start seeing that in some of our data here as well. So where we see MLS beds, this is actually indicating to us that the MLS was where they got the bed count from. Now, part of the reason that is, and one of the things that I like about this particular example, is because Tulsa County, for whatever reason, doesn't actually keep track of the bedroom count. I don't know why. It is what it is. So whenever you're actually searching for a property that does not have that bedroom count, if it had been listed before, it'll have the bedroom count there. The baths is also going to be something that has come over from the MLS. Again, it's just effectively letting us know that by having MLS precede whatever the data is. We've got MLS sales price, a sales date. Here we go. Now we're back to just the county records, the building square footage, the lot square footage, the year built, and also what the property type is. In this case, SFR for single family residence. Now the owner information, fairly basic section. If this did have multiple owners, we would see owner name number 1 and then owner name number 2, and this would be filled in and this would all move over so that we could have more space. Realist also does something interesting. It'll actually extrapolate whether or not this particular property is owner occupied by taking a look at what the tax billing address is and matching that up with what the address for the property is. So there are some occasions where you may find that the owner occupied is not correct because maybe they live so far out that they don't actually have their mail delivered to them. They have a PO box or something, but for the most part, it should be accurate. Now, the next section down is our location information. This is where we're going to be finding the school district that this particular property is in. So notice it's not clarifying for us what schools the kids will go to. It's just clarifying what the unified school district is. But we do have the subdivision name. In fact, actually, anytime you're adding a listing into the system, if you're not certain what the name of the subdivision is, this is where we recommend that you go. Because oftentimes, like we saw with Minshall Park, I mean, there can be a dozen different properties or a dozen different, subdivisions that are all the same name, kind of roughly, but there's a resub here, there's a addendum over here on the other side. Like, there's so many different ways that that stuff can appear. I always just recommend that you guys go back to Realist, double check what the subdivision is in here, and if it does happen that this particular subdivision, so like if you guys we're trying to add this to the system and you had Englewood Edition B713. If we needed to have this added into Matrix for you to be able to use it, just give us a call and let us know. It takes literally a couple of minutes to do. But if you do end up in a case where you're trying to add a listing into the system, you find that the subdivision is not mentioned on the tax records, in order for us to add that into Matrix, what you'll need to do is actually get the filed plat. So that means not just the plat that has some basic information on it, it has to be one that has the county assessor's signature, all the stamps on it, all that jazz. We need to have the one that's been filed. So not too common an issue, but if you guys are maybe often working with new construction or house that just got built on previously vacant land, that kind of stuff. Another thing to mention, township range and section over here to the right, 19 north, 13 east, 33. I know that oftentimes when people are referring to the township range and section, it's actually in the opposite order. This just happens to be how the system displays everything, both in Matrix and in Realist. But whenever you guys are searching for that stuff, oftentimes we will get these calls. I know that this is completely innocent and it's going to be something that, is only occasional, but people will call in from time to time and be like, well, there's no township range and section. Everywhere in the entire state has a township range and section, just full stop. There is no blank spaces. There's no missing parts as far as what we've been able to find. It's the whole state is covered with the grid. But the important thing to remember about that is that even if it's not being referenced anywhere else, more likely than not, if you guys get into Realist, you can find the township range and section. When you put in the listing, you can just copy those individual sections over and put those into your listing. Now, if it does turn out that it's missing from Realist, and you guys are trying to put in a listing, it's requiring that information, you may need to try and go to a third party to track that down, because that's usually what people mean whenever they call in. It's not that that it doesn't have a township range and section. It's literally just that it's not mentioned anywhere, which means that you have to go back and try and find it according to a map, and it's admittedly a little bit of a pain to deal with. I did find, it depends on how deep you guys want to go down that rabbit hole, but I personally did find a extension, I think is what the term was. I don't remember if it was like a separate piece of software or not, but it was an extension for Google Earth, which is free software that Google makes. You guys can install it on your computer. It has satellite imagery, it has map imagery, it has 3D imagery, it's got 3D architecture for like famous buildings, famous places. You can literally fly your way through Paris if you want, whatever. But one of the important things that you can do with that is that once you have it, you can keep notes on property. So like if you guys actually wanted to have a map that, shows every part of every detail of every property in the entire world, pretty much, Google Earth has that functionality, and there's an extension that you guys can add onto it that actually shows you the township range and section grid, so that you can actually accurately find what the township range and section is for pretty much every property in the whole country, as long as they're using that township range and section rather than is it meets and bounds or mets and bounds? I never remember what's the proper pronunciation. Anyway, next we have our tax information. This is where we have our tax parcel number. Interestingly enough, since Matrix and Realist are connected to each other, this tax parcel number is going to be the easiest way for it to connect to the information. So for instance, if this was previously vacant land, well, that tax parcel number will have always existed. Prime example of this actually is, wait, is that right? Actually, you know what? We'll skip that example. I'm getting off track anyway. We did have a listing that we use whenever we're doing the search function overview in Matrix that shows that there's a property that was previously vacant land, and then it had a house built on it, and suddenly it had an address. But this tax parcel number should always be the same unless there's been some kind of split or something. Just as a side note, especially for those of you guys who are working in Tulsa, or maybe the county that you guys are working in has found a way to kind of sneakily add the township range and section in here. Tulsa County actually has a 5-digit number for this property, and then the township range and section are all built into the middle, and then there's another little section over here. So since it's always going to be in the teens, they effectively just dropped the 1 and dropped the north, because we're always going to have properties in the northeast quadrant of the state. So it's dropping the 1, dropping the north, dropping the 1, dropping the east, and then it just shows the 9, 3, and then 3, 3 for the section. So 9, 3, and then 3, 3 for the section. So if you guys are ever wondering what the township range and section is for a property that's in Tulsa County, the tax parcel should have that built into the actual parcel number. Just kind of one of the nice things. This does not forgive them for missing out on the bedroom count. Just saying. This is cool. This is necessary. Anyway, a little further down, we have our assessment and tax. This is good information for the people that need it, but if you guys don't need it, you probably will forget that I mentioned it. All of these sections that we've been through so far, you can collapse. So instead of having to scroll down and down and down, so on and so forth, you can just keep collapsing those. This is actually not getting rid of the view. So even if you end up maybe not ever wanting to see this particular section again, it's always just going to be present there. We do have an option to customize the view, which I'll cover right before we go to our break. But the next section down here is going to be characteristics. Now, the characteristics, again, are going to include some information that came over not just from the county records, but also includes some data that came over from the last time this property was listed. So for instance, we have a basement type, the crawl space and slab. This is information that came over directly from the MLS. We can see that with this little MLS prefix. Same thing that we saw when we were looking at the bedroom count. Bedroom count includes MLS before it. Now, if you do end up finding that there's some information that maybe has a discrepancy where the tax record is showing one thing, but the MLS information is showing something else, you'll see that it actually shows up the same way that this does, where it says MLS 3, and then it'll show up with tax, and then whatever the number is that's separate from that. So if you hold your cursor over any of these other sections, so like full bath, for instance, you'll see the format that it comes up in, tax 3, MLS 3. So, but that'll be filled in from square one. So instead of having to hold your cursor over something, but the only reason why they show this when you hold your cursor over it now is just to show that there is actually consensus between these two. So the full bath count in the tax record and the MLS record both show the same number. All right. One of the important things that you guys can customize when you're going through the reports is instead of just getting rid of full-on sections, there is also another way to customize this. I'm going to go up to Customize View, and there's a fixed view or dynamic view. Now, the dynamic view is what we've been seeing so far. Now, I mentioned before when we were looking at owner information, if there was a second owner that was built into this tax record, that this would all shift down and there would be a second field right here. So if I go up to Customize View and switch from the dynamic view over to fixed, what this is actually going to show us now is the fixed view will have a space for every single piece of information that could ever appear on the tax record, even if it's empty for this particular property. So like I said, we've got owner name 2, empty. We've got historic preservation zoning code or historic preservation district, both of which are empty. We didn't see those before. And same thing goes with our characteristics. When we get down here to our characteristics section, look at how many empty spaces we have on here. Now, if I were to try to print or email this to somebody and I still have it set to this fixed view, it's going to show all of these empty spaces. So even though we don't actually have any information in there, it's just going to keep showing that. So if you maybe get into a mode where you're always getting into tax records and you're always looking for like the main example that I actually remember somebody called in was like, I can't find the historical preservation for this particular property. And it just didn't have any. Like there was no historical preservation zoning code or district or anything like that. So I had them go up to the customized view and switch over to fixed so that they could see the empty spaces, because that's what they were actually looking for, was whether or not there was something. With the dynamic view, it just eradicates all of the extraneous fields, even though there might have been no value to it. It was empty. It's still beneficial to see it every time, just so you know when it's not there. But characteristics is pretty simple. We collapse these all back again. Here we go. Now, the next section down is going to be our cell score indicator. This one's kind of trying to be the digital version of a real estate Nostradamus. It's trying to predict whether or not this particular property is actually going to sell, like how likely it is to sell in the next 6 months. That's actually indicated down here as well. And then we can see these little brief explanations, kind of a USA Today style, just trying to familiarize you with what this is trying to show. But in this case, this was actually a property that when I was teaching the webinars in 2020, we would actually see this in the, I think I want to say that it was in the like high 700s. So it actually was very, very likely, at least according to this sell score indicator, that this property was going to sell. And of course, obviously it didn't. This property hasn't actually been sold in a while. You can see the last time it sold was in 2012. So this is something to kind of take with a grain of salt, but if you guys do end up in a situation where you're searching for a particular property, and lo and behold, you guys are already in talks with the seller, and you guys get in here to take a look at the sell score indicator and it's really high, just take a screenshot and let me know, because I would love to see that that's actually doing something of value for people. But in the interim, it might be a good idea not to include this whenever you guys are sending information off to the seller. I'll show you guys how to turn that off under customize view in a minute here. But before we do that, I also wanted to show you guys another section that might not be of any import, depending on who it is that you're dealing with. Maybe they don't mind seeing estimates as long as they understand that those estimates should be tempered with, this was not made by a human, this was just something that was automated, et cetera, et cetera. So in our case, the estimated value is effectively Realist's version of what you guys probably know as an AVM, or maybe have been more exposed to what's called a Zestimate, everybody's least favorite value estimate. But this estimated value, it's coming from a combination of information. So this isn't just something that they kind of made willy-nilly. This has actually been processed through an algorithm that Realist has come up with. It's the Real AVM. Notice there's even a trademark on it. The AVM, or automated valuation model, is actually made to try and predict what the value should be for a property based on public records. Now, the Real AVM, so the one that they're actually marketing with Realist, is not only taking information just from the public records, but it's also combining the active, pending, and closed listings within the MLS as well. So before something even gets registered with the tax, with the county assessor's office, because the property sold and there's been some exchanging of money. If the property had sold in the MLS, but that hadn't been recorded yet, it'll actually still show the effect of that particular sale in this Real AVM. So in our case, we're actually seeing a flat number. That's the 276,000. And then we see the range that it's provided for us is actually pretty huge. I mean, we've got 36 down and then another 36 up. Now the confidence score that we see is a 64. A little further down on this little, I have this blown up so that it's really large on the screen just because the text is kind of fine. By the way, just for context, this is what it looks like normally. This is the standard zoom. So it's full screen and I can read it perfectly fine on mine, but I'm just going to blow this up a little bit. This confidence score that it provided here is 64. And you'll notice that the confidence score range is actually 50 to 100. So that means that this is still pretty much on the lower end. I mean, if you think about this in grading terms, it's pretty bad. I mean, that's a D. But what this is actually showing us is that this confidence score is relatively low because maybe there isn't enough public record information to actually give us a more accurate depiction of what this property is worth, or this property is maybe extremely unique. Maybe it's larger, smaller, has more rooms, less rooms, has more land, less land than any of the properties nearby. So if it can't find comparable listings or comparable properties nearby, there's a very good likelihood that you guys might end up in a situation where this confidence score is low, this number isn't quite accurate, and the range that it has is huge. So the lower this goes, the less accurate this is, the broader the range is, and that's going to end up indicating to your seller that maybe this number can't be trusted entirely. We also have a forecasted standard deviation. FSD is also going to, the higher this goes, the broader this goes, the less accurate this will be. So just keep all of that in mind. I did end up in a situation recently where somebody was asking questions about the estimated value. And they were like, well, I don't know if I could trust this. That's fine. You guys always do have the option to run the comparables tab or even do a CMA matrix, which, just so you guys are aware, we actually have a class on. It's a CE credit class even. But if you guys do end up wanting to hone that in, you can always run through those other steps. In his case, actually, the confidence score, I think, was a 95 out of 100. And the number was actually pretty close. I think it was within $10,000 of what he was originally planning on charging for the property. But the range was where I wanted to kind of indicate to him, this is how you know that that number is actually fairly accurate, because the range was like maybe 20,000 from top to bottom. So if you guys ever find something that's a really high confidence score, it's always kind of gratifying to be like, oh, wow, that's actually what I was planning on charging for the property. But if this is not what's interesting, if this is not valuable to your client, or if it's a number that's just simply not relevant because it's not close to what you guys think as a real estate professional, you can actually get rid of this estimated value. In fact, actually, we covered just the last thing on here that I want to get rid of on the screen. We also have the mortgage history. Now, this could be valuable information for our client. Other times it might just be a little thorn in the side. So up at the top here, we have the customize view button. This is where we can see our fixed and dynamic view that I showed earlier. This is also where we can see all of the different tabs that we had open. So remember, each time I was collapsing those didn't disappear. They were literally just making it so that I couldn't see them. But in my case, I want to get rid of estimated value. I want to get rid of the propensity sell score. And I also want to get rid of the mortgage history. If I wanted to rearrange any of these, you notice I can't, it's not going to allow me to rearrange them. It tries to keep that same format. This is just one of the few places that you can't rearrange it. But when I hit apply, that gets rid of any of those spare sections. So I no longer have my sell score indicator. I no longer have what the price estimate is. And now I no longer have the mortgage history either. So it makes it a little bit easier to get through. And then, of course, doesn't end up muddying the waters when you guys are starting to do those pricing discussions. Now, the next section down would have been the listing information. So underneath the sell score and the estimated value, we have listing information, which shows us all of the previous times this particular listing had been listed. Now, it's going to start us off with this top section showing the most recent listing, and then it just goes backwards in time. So we've got the immediate previous listing that had expired, the previous listing before that that closed, and the one before that that also closed. Now, the listing information also has a link here. It's the only place really that has a nice handy link that goes to somewhere else. When we click on this, it's actually going to provide us with a history search for this particular property within Matrix. So here we can see all 4 of those listings, including the most recent one that sold. And so this way we can actually dive into maybe one of the specific listings and find out more details about it, see who it was that had listed it, who it that was that sold it, etc. Now, a little further down beyond that, we've got our last market sale and sales history. We're almost done. I'm going to let us go to break here after we cover this. Or almost done before the break, not with the class, sorry. But on the last market sale and sales history, what this is showing us is just like we saw with the listing information where it shows the most recent transaction at the top and then a history below that. This is doing the exact same thing. Here's the most recent transaction. We see Michael Taylor bought this property. Tax record indicated that it was actually bought in January of 2013. This one actually shows that the property was only closed in the MLS on the 11th of February. So several days later, almost 2 weeks later. But down below here, we see our recording date, our closing date, sales price, nominal, which I'll cover again in a moment, buyer name, seller name, document number, and document type. Now, we've been asking Realist for years to start including the documents. I think that because of the fact that so many of the county assessors' offices were using old software, there wasn't even a passable amount of consistency with uh, the data that each of the county assessors' offices would have. And so we didn't really have a way to get the documents uploaded. I'm hoping that that's going to change now that all the county assessors' offices are unifying into that one piece of software, but we'll find out. We're going to keep pressing for that just because it could be incredibly handy, especially with subdivisions. But when we're looking back through this list, you'll see again, it's in reverse chronological order. So we see our most recent, and it goes backwards, 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 and so on. There's a little scroll bar down here at the bottom, and then you also have a little arrow that you guys can move this backwards with. Now, starting us off, we see, again, our transaction here where it sold from Tara Cope to Michael Taylor. Immediately previously, we see that there was a purchase where it goes to Tara Brother. And then here we see this in 2008, right before it actually sold to Michael Taylor. Robert Cope and Tara Cope, Robert Cope, Tara Cope, but it was previously Tara Brother. So it looks like she bought the house from the Eileen Cannon Living Trust. And then when they got married, they ended up putting it under both of their names. Now we see that if there's a sales price that's attached to this, this was actually a transaction. There was some money that changed hands over this. But in this case, we actually don't see any money changing hands. So no sales price indicated here. And instead, we just see this little Y indicating yes, or whether or not this was a nominal change. So this was not actually a transaction. This was just a change that was nominal. We just wanted to change who was the name on the account. Now we see that as well here when we had Charles and Eileen Cannon ended up moving it into the Eileen Cannon Trust. And that's actually who ended up selling it to Tara Brother before she got married. Before that, we see the Espo Construction Company had actually bought the house, or at least what was left of the house probably, back in 2001. Maybe there was some kind of catastrophic damage or they needed to just get out of it. But they ended up buying the property and then selling it for a nice markup. But all the way back here, we've got our first digital records back in 1993 when James and Rita Armstrong ended up purchasing it. So it's kind of a quick, easy way to tour who's owned the property recently and whether or not there was any money that changed hands. Then down at the very bottom of this report is our property map. So I mentioned this earlier, but the property map is fairly simple. What this is actually showing us is just a little parcel dimensions preview. Now notice that this is lot dimensions are estimated. And even as we can see here, there's actually a little overlay that Google has provided that shows where it thinks the building is. And you can't really tell on this particular view, but you notice there's a tiny little hump that's coming out. This wall goes all the way up back here and then comes here and here. But the little shape that they've added for the building is not entirely accurate. Additionally, some of the properties, some of the parcels, depending on the county, may actually be a little bit off. Depends on how accurate they are to GPS, but they try to make sure that all the parcel dimensions are accurate. And of course, if you guys end up in any situations where it's not, let us know. Then finally, over here to the right, we have a contextual map. So this one's giving us a little bit of context for the parcel itself. This is indicating to us where the parcel is located. So we see that there's Highway 66. We've got this road that for whatever reason isn't named. It's probably named just off screen or something, but we can kind of get a little general idea of where it's located. But I'm going to leave it on this screen for now. And let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break. I'm going to put the video back up on the screen. As soon as we're done with our break, you'll see the video leave the screen, the music will stop, and we'll get back started again. I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. Right. Let's go ahead and get started again. Okay, so where we left off, we were actually talking about all of the different parts and pieces of the report. One of the important things that I wanted to circle back to before we move on to the next stuff, currently I have it in the dynamic view, and I have removed estimated mortgage and propensity sell score. So down here at the very bottom of the screen, so after all of the other options that we've seen, all the data that they had collected from the county assessor's office, there's going to be a print button and an email button. Now, the print button is fairly simple. We've got either a quick print or customized print. The quick print option is going to take this particular tab, so the one that we're actually currently looking at, property details up here at the top, and this is going to take the information and just dump it onto a PDF for us. And when we jump into the PDF, it's going to show us only the information that we had originally asked for it to show when we were looking at the property details. So again, the estimated value has been removed. The propensity sell score and the mortgage information, all of it's gone. So we've actually pared this down into just a 2-page report. Whereas if I wanted to go back, maybe add in all of the fields, make sure that the estimated value was put in and the mortgage history and the propensity sell score, all of that information will now be included And all of the bloat that comes with showing the fixed view will also be included. So this time when we look at the report, it's going to be 3 pages. It's going to have a bunch of blanks on there. It's going to be including information that might not be beneficial to the seller because they don't know what this sell score is or what that means or what the estimated value of their property really is. All of those pieces of information are going to be a little bit harder to kind of explain. Same thing goes with this foreclosure history. It's got a whole section here that's just empty. It's just nothing in here. So again, make sure that you guys are on the dynamic view. This is the default, but if you guys ever end up in that situation where you need to see the extra information, that's where you can do so. All right, so let's switch over now to the customize option. So when we go down here to the print, the quick print, as I mentioned, is going to be whatever tab you happen to be on. Customize print is actually going to allow us to switch between these other tabs. So we can actually select multiple tabs of information here at the top and include those on a print. But let's actually switch over to see what each of those extra tabs actually includes. So when I go over to this comparables tab, what this is going to show me is effectively the beginning of a report specifically formulated for this particular property to find what similar properties are available. So in my case, if I wanted to actually find any of the properties within a certain radius or with certain attributes, etc., it's going to be a little bit hard to do. So what this is actually meant to do is actually just grab some of the properties that match a specific preset collection of criteria and then produce a search based on that, giving us some, statistics just to give us a high, medium, or high, median, and low, as well as provide us some details about each of those individual properties. Now, when it first landed on this page, you'll notice that it just automatically grabbed 4 results. If this is not the results that I wanted, or maybe this isn't enough, or it's too few, I'm going to have to adjust my search criteria up here at the top. So when you click on search criteria, it's going to show us the number of comparables, how it's being sorted, where the data source is coming from, so whether or not we want it to be just the tax record, just the MLS, or both. I'll be honest, most of these defaults that you see up here at the top are going to be the same things that you guys should be using on a daily basis. What we're going to have to change, though, is oftentimes going to be the distance from the subject, and then also down here towards the bottom, our search time period. Now, for those of you guys who have been through our CMAs and matrix class before, this stuff might sound familiar, but if you haven't, here's some cheats for the next time you guys take that class. When you're going to be doing a CMA, the proximity, the area, or the distance, whatever you guys want to call it, should be relatively close. Now, we can expand this if we end up in a situation where maybe we're not finding enough results, but all of the properties in the nearby vicinity might be similar enough, or at least be made by the same builder, or might be in the same subdivision, so on and so forth. So the area is very important. Make your adjustments based on what's a realistic amount of distance. In fact, for those of you guys who have worked with any brokers on doing a BPO or made any BPOs yourself, you may be familiar with how stringent some of the lenders might be as far as how far a particular property can be before it's no longer considered a comparable. So you can also make adjustments based on that, but I'm going to just set mine to a mile away. And then I'm going to leave the rest of these off. It's going to automatically find mostly what I need anyway. So down here at the bottom, I've got search time period, and I have it set to 6 months back. Now, 6 months is actually the recommended amount of time back. So I typically don't recommend that people have like a year or more back. In fact, actually the max that Matrix, or the max that, the Realist allows us to go back is a full year. I have seen in a couple other systems, like I know that RPR does an option that goes up to 18 months back. But as you guys probably may have cringed at that particular notion, if you go too far back, the relevance of that data is going to drop off dramatically, very, very quickly. So it's strongly recommended that if you guys do end up in those kinds of cases, that when you're going through the information, make sure that you're restricting this to a realistic amount of time for the area that you're searching within. Now, if the area that you're searching within is really hopping and there's a lot of properties moving, well, you might want to set this to something 6 or less. If you can find 20 results within the last 3 months for the particular area you're working in, cool. And then just work with that information. If you can find 20 results when you search for a year back, but if you start doing 6 months back, it's only like 5 or something like that, that might be okay. It's all going to depend on the property that you're working in and the area that it's located within. But if I move down a little further, the living building area, the distance is set to 15%, lot area set to 15%. These are kind of default ones. Again, if you're getting more results, oftentimes it might be better to change the distance or the time period. But if you're getting a ton of results and you actually need to narrow it down because it's maybe finding things that are too different from the property that you're working with, you can change this number as well. But notice there's not really a lot of nuance to this. We do have more nuance available in either the square feet options. So if you guys actually wanted to put in a specific range, you guys can actually do that. But I usually recommend just leaving it on the percentage difference. Now, the last couple things they have on this list, at the very bottom of this, we have the land use, same as subject, and the style. Land use, just leave that same as subject option. That's your system default so that it doesn't matter what the actual property type is. It'll automatically recognize it and only find other properties that are similar to that. The style is going to function pretty much the same way, except there's a really big problem with the style. We used to have a CE credit class that was actually introducing people to all of the different property styles. But there might be some things that you may end up looking at and you're just like, oh, that's a recent property. It must be modern. Well, just like the dance style, modern dance, it's actually a codified architectural style. So if you guys are in a situation where you're looking for properties, searching by style could be a bit of a, it's not going to be as reliable as one would hope. Just literally because you might not always necessarily know exactly what the style is. And sometimes it's not even marked correctly on the tax record. So leaving the style blank is actually the best option. I wish they had a land use option that was similar to the style where it was same as subject, but again, even the tax records might not have the right data. Now, we've made some changes to this. I expanded my area. I left my time frame the same. I did change my differences, but I did want to point something out here. We've got a save and submit button down here at the bottom. When I hit save and submit, what this is going to do is actually save all of these settings that I've messed with as my system default. So what that means is that the next time I get in here, I'm actually going to have the exact same settings before I even go in to start messing with the search criteria. Now, this could be handy if you guys want to use this comparables tab often. So for instance, if you guys are always working in the same area, maybe you guys always need to have the distance changed. Maybe you guys always need to have a 6-month back and 10%, whatever. This might be what you want to use indefinitely. Now you can set that save and submit and you're good to go. Or if you guys end up in a situation where maybe you're working with a property that's pretty dissimilar from what you guys have worked with in the past, what you can do is actually do a just regular submit button. So what this is going to do is say, I only want to make those adjustments that I've made to this particular search function. So now I'm only going to be seeing properties that are really close in similarity to my property. Or I can come back here and I can just make the change to the difference. I'm going to increase that to 15%. And maybe let's go back to 8 months. So again, I'm not hitting save and submit. I don't want these to be my system defaults. I'm just going to hit submit. And now I have a little bit more robust list of comparables. I got my full 20 out of this now. Now, if it comes down to us taking a look at this particular list and realizing that, oh, you know what, some of these properties like number 19 and 20 and some others in this particular area over here, these aren't going to be in the same area really. So we might end up wanting to go through and actually making some adjustments to which ones we are going to be using when we finalize this report. Because down here at the very bottom, there's a generate report button. If we want to get rid of any of these, you just hit those check boxes. So like we'll get rid of 19, get rid of 20. Looks like 18 is not really relevant. 17, 16, and 15, I'm assuming as well. Yeah, there we go. Oh, even 14 is out there. There we go. So now I've narrowed down my results, and I did that just by using the map. But whenever I hit this generate report button, so I've finalized the check boxes, I've made sure that my search criteria only includes what I want. When I hit that generate report button, it's going to show me a final version of the map. It's going to show me what my search criteria was, but notice it did not indicate to me why it was that I got rid of any of the spares. So if I do end up having a client that takes this exact same search criteria and they go search for themselves, they're going to find those extra spare 6 listings or 6 properties because those are available for people to find. Oh, 7, excuse me. So if you guys end up in situations like that, just be prepared to start mentioning to the client, like, look, it was east of LaFortune Park. There's a completely different architecture there. There's a completely different vibe there, neighborhood, whatever term you want to use to make sure that they get what the difference is. Next section down, we've got our summary statistics. This is going to show our subject property. So the last time it was sold, not showing an estimated value, but then it's going to be showing our high, low, median, and average. So this could be the starting point for some discussions about the price as well, because we see that 400,000 is pretty high for the area, but really not that much higher than some of the other properties because almost everything is middling around that 300,000 range. So a little further down, we can see our subject property, and we can actually scroll through each and every individual listing, or excuse me, each and every individual property to find all of the details about those properties on a side-by-side comparison, which is really handy. Now, once we've generated this report, we also have the option to come down here and print this or email this. I'm going to do the quick print option. Again, the quick print is just going to grab this particular tab that I'm on and then produce the PDF for it. Oh, of course, I ended up hitting the wrong button. That's my mistake. Let's try this again. Don't hit cancel, Mike. Okay, open with Firefox. Perfect. So notice this is a little bit different look and feel than the previous one. It starts us off with a map. It shows all of these dots with numbers on them. And then down here, it shows our search criteria, summary statistics. And then the next pages are all going to be the subject property doing a side-by-side comparison with each and every property so that we can see that side-by-side, make sure that we're actually getting a complete understanding of, well, this one is actually a significantly higher value because of X, Y, or Z difference that the property has compared to our property. Or maybe in this case, we're seeing this was the value of the property when it sold in, it's like, and what is the, oh yeah. So actually we can say to our client, look, this is what this particular property sold for last year, but you have more bedrooms or more bathrooms than them, an extra bathroom. It looks like you guys have almost the same square footage, but there's an extra 200 square feet. Like those kinds of differences can be compared side by side. It makes it really handy. But I did want to point out, if we go to our customize print option, I've got property detail, comparables, neighborhood profile now. If we had not already gone through and customized our comparables tab, and I just jumped into this report, was looking at the property details, and then did the customized print, including comparables, it's going to run with whatever our system defaults were. So if you land on a brand new piece of property that you've never searched for before, you've never generated a report for on the comparable side, when you guys end up running the custom print option or custom email option, it's going to finalize that report whether you verified the information in it or not. So just be prepared for that eventuality, if you guys end up getting in a situation where you just jump in, save it, and then leave, you could end up with a client that's got a bunch of comparable property information that they may not have had any context for. Maybe don't even fully understand what this is that you've sent them. All right. Next, we've got the Market Trends tab. Market Trends tab is fairly simple. I'm just going to cover a couple brief things here. This is more meant for you as the agent. It's got some basic information, just kind of helping you keep your pulse on the market. But one of the things that I actually want to show you guys is this median sales price option. We've got median sales price broken down by tax and then MLS. Now, the tax side of things, it's going to be showing us a different time frame and a different scale than what we're going to be seeing on the MLS side of things. But the reason why I think this is actually at least relatively beneficial, when you're looking at this market trend here, this is showing us what the values are. This is, again, showing the median of this. But this way I can actually see it's been cleansed of any of those outliers. Like if a property sold for, $2 million, it's not going to have that dramatic effect on the median sales price. The average would be dramatically thrown off, but I'm sure if you guys have been in any of my classes previously, you've heard me harping on the difference between median and average. But let's actually take a more apples to apples comparison. So right here on this tax side, I'm seeing September was the most recent information, and I'm seeing the top of this scale is 250,000. So I'm going to come to the end here. We're going to take a look at the purple line, which is the zip code. And it says 231,000 was the median for September. So I'm going to scroll down here and we're going to take a look at this MLS side. So this is actually showing the difference between all of the properties that had moved in that county versus all the properties that moved specifically within the MLS. Now that means there's going to be some overlap between these two, but the notable difference is that the tax side is going to be showing anything that's sold from family members, anything that's sold that was for sale by owner. So these tax values actually might be a little bit thrown off. So if you're trying to reinforce with your client that you're working with that it is actually valuable to work with an agent, you can show them, all right, the tax side of things, September was 231,000. If I come down to the MLS side of things and look at September, the value that we were getting on the median was 245,000. So we had a $14,000 increase in what the value was of the properties. So obviously getting an agent to help sell your property is actually going to be valuable because of all of the properties that were moving in this county, 231 was the median. Of all the properties that were moving thanks to a realtor, they were getting an extra $14,000. Now, this isn't always the case, and it's also important to recognize that these scales and these time frames are different. So always make sure that whenever you guys do end up trying to show this to a client, that you're contextualizing that information for them, because as we live in an age of a lot of disinformation and misinformation being spread by people willingly or not, it's important to recognize there's an easy way for people to hide lies with the truth and justify lies with the truth when they show scales that are wrong, and time frames that are wrong, all that kind of stuff. So always verify and trust those sources. Now, next tab over. This is one that I actually really hate. Just full on, not going to try and hide it. I liked this idea at first, but I've had enough people share bad experiences about this that I'm kind of not fond of it. But what this does is it actually shows all of the properties that are in the immediate vicinity, and then it shows the details for it. So you can see this is kind of like the side-by-side comparison that we saw earlier. Small problem. When you guys are taking a look at this, this is actually showing who it is that actually lives nearby, which could be fine if there's no prejudice or anything else going on, but sometimes people will see this and they won't like a specific name, or they might not like that they're seeing a bunch of properties that are owned by companies, or here's an investment property. Maybe this was a rental. They don't like that because they see that there's a non-person name on there. There's just so many different ways that this could go wrong if you guys end up sharing this information with the client that I just don't think that it's that useful. Now, I have had people explain some of the very limited uses that this can have, but it's all things that you guys can do when you're back on the map. So if you guys are back on the map and you guys wanted to kind of do some research about who it is and what's nearby and so on and so forth, instead of pulling that up and being tempted to send that off to the client, who then might end up really showing who they really are, sometimes it might be better just to do the research on your own rather than having them say something that might put you in an uncomfortable position. But next tab over is our neighborhood profile. Neighborhood profile is actually really beneficial. This actually shows us some of the demographic information. It used to make it really explicit that this was all going to be for the county, or not, excuse me, not the county, for the zip code, but it doesn't really give that indication anymore. I wish that it would at least say based on zip code such and such like it used to, but just keep that in your head. And what this is actually showing us is the zip code's population, how much it's gone up, how much it's gone down. I imagine it's probably dropped even further since COVID, but number of households, number of people in the household, households with children, and so on. It also shows us an age breakdown, so we can see all of these numbers of who's in what category and so on. This is all based on information from the 2020 census. I wish that that was also indicated on here. In case you guys hear me harping on citing sources, this is something that RPR does very, very well. So most of the pieces of information that you guys can find in RPR will have a source. It shows you the details about what this information is, where it was that it got it, how frequently it's updated, all that kind of stuff. Realist doesn't quite do that, but again, the information is still going to be of use. They just try and keep things a little bit more simplistic. There's a gender breakdown, a marital status breakdown. We've got our housing, the median home sales price. Again, this is a median for just the entire time, not recently. We've got our median year built, so we know roughly when it was that most of the properties in this particular zip code were made. We've got our occupancy showing us the vacant, rented, owned, so on. Man, I remember when this was in the small single digits. A lot of vacant properties in this area. Quality of life. This is going to break it down by how many people are in specific industries, whether it's blue collar versus white collar, what the household income is. This one's also had some changes. There used to be a lot more people up here. It's like it's been dropping. Average household income, that's also dropped over the years. Commute method. We live in America where we don't really have very good public transit, but we do at least get to see how many people in this area are using public transit. Since this is a suburban neighborhood, it's not quite as common to see that. Move it over to where I live and it's a little bit higher number. We've got the weather here. This shows us the average temperatures. Now, in case you guys are wondering when this might be of value, this could be interesting to investors so that they know maybe, all right, if I'm going to be buying a property to do rentals in, I need to know what kind of people are already living in that neighborhood so that I can find out whether or not I need to increase or decrease my expectations on what the rent should be. How many people are in the area are going to actually have enough money to do these kinds of rentals, that kind of stuff, or even just to do a house flip, that kind of stuff. We also have an education section. You can get rid of some of these sections as well. So like if you guys wanted to send this information over to an investor and this might not be of any value to them, you can just uncheck this checkbox the same way that we did when we were looking at our property details with the sales score indicator and the estimated value. We've got our schools down here as well. I would strongly recommend, if you guys do end up in a situation where you're working with clients that have kids, if they are actually going to be sending their kids to a school in the area, just remind them that what this has done is it's actually provided us with a proximity search. This is not showing us what school the kid is going to go to, because obviously in this case we see that we've got 3 different elementary schools and then a private school. Now clearly this isn't something that they're going to go to all 3 of these schools. all three of these schools almost service the exact same groupings of grades. So we're going to have to find out from the school district who it is that they're going to be, or which school it is they're going to be going to. But you can also customize which schools are going to be available. So like if there were more schools available beyond these, you can choose whether to show public schools or private schools or public elementary school, public high school, so on and so forth. Then we've got our local businesses section. This is another one that we can customize. But let's actually jump up to this customize view option so we can see what we can change. So in here, we've got our checkboxes so that we can choose which elements of this we want to include. So for instance, if I didn't want to include education or schools because this is an older couple, they don't really have kids, they don't have to worry about that stuff, they're just empty nesting, hit apply, and I'm good to go. No schools, no education level mentioned, we're good to go. Let's say that I wanted to customize what information is still going to be available. I go to my search criteria button, oddly enough, and we're going to change what the distance is. We're going to change how many are showing per category, and then we can see which businesses we would like to include. So if they wanted to see what healthcare services are nearby, or if there was any hospitality like hotels, but pet services, travel options, then I can maybe increase this all the way up to, let's do 20. But I only want to see the stuff that's within roughly walking distance, so we'll do 1 mile. Schools doesn't matter, but we do see that I've got all of these checkboxes checked. I chose to include everything just so that they could see it, but choose public, private, or both, and choose all the schools. But I'm going to submit. And now under my local businesses, you'll see that there's a lot more on there. So it makes it a little bit easier to see, who's in the area, if there's any doctors or hospitals, hotels, shopping, so on and so forth. I always liked seeing the shopping one because you can find out whether or not there's a grocery store nearby, which is always important for me. I don't like having to drive far for this stuff like that. All right, I'm going to switch this back over to 10. Get rid of a couple of these. There we go. All right. So as we've gone through here, you guys might have noticed that the print and email options have actually been kind of staying on all of these except for market trends where we only had a print option. So we discussed how quick print is going to be grabbing just this particular tab. The same thing is going to be true if we try to email something. So if I just wanted to email this particular tab off to my client, I can do quick email. This is my reply to, which is going to be just my email address. This is who it's going to be sent to. So we put in their email address, we put in a carbon copy or a blind carbon copy, and we can send it on its way. There is a space up at the top right where we can actually customize system-wide defaults. And that's where you guys can put in a signature. You notice mine is blank at the moment. But if I needed to make an adjustment to that, we can just click on that gear icon and there's a signature section. But if we wanted to customize an email, it does still give us the same options that we saw when we were doing the customize print option, where we can see the tabs that we want to include. And then once you hit proceed, it's going to process all of those, create the PDF, and then it'll actually do the email function like we saw with the quick email. There we go. Add to email, and again, person@email.com, blah, 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 and send. All right. So down at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, we have a transaction desk button. For those of you guys who aren't using transaction desk, this won't be of any interest to you, but if you guys have had any interest in it or have been using transaction desk, if you guys pull up a tax record while you guys are doing your research on a property, there's going to be a listing for this. You guys got to get the listing agreement signed, filled out, et cetera, et cetera. Instead of having to write down all this information or grab the property data form in advance or whatever the case may be, you can actually just click on this transaction desk button. It's going to grab the data from that particular listing or from that particular tax record and import that information over into transaction desk. So it starts up a brand new transaction and we can have all of the information from the tax record filled out automatically. So instead of having to worry about getting all of these details of what the year built was, and the MLS numbers, and the legal description, all of that information will be imported directly from Realist. So it makes it really easy to kind of jump into a transaction without pretty much any extra work. So that's a transaction desk button. There is also a value map button. We don't cover that in class, but if you guys are interested in learning about the value map and how you can add it effectively a Zillow Zestimate function to your company website, there is a little gear icon up at the top. This is where we have all of our search defaults, our email signature option, whether or not we want to leave the parcels on, which we'll cover in a moment. And then there's also a button here for value map. So if you guys are interested in having a really robust search function that's built into your website, you guys can actually register for that process and it'll get you the code to insert into your website. So it's pretty neat. But again, we don't cover that in class, so I'm going to jump back here. So we're looking back at our report. If I want to get out of my report and go back to our search function, I can hit back up here at the top, and that'll bring me back to where I can see the search that I created, the dot that it put on the map, and my one search result. So now let's actually jump into the customization of the search function. So now that we know what it looks like once we've actually found our results and we want to do the research on that particular property, let's actually jump back to how we do our searches in the first place. So I mentioned before, we've got some basic criteria that are built into what we've referred to as the general query, which was one of the system default search functions. There's this little golden padlock on the general query, the foreclosure query, and if you guys have it, then my search default. And you'll notice there's also a bunch of these other ones that have just Mike's Mix, default for Mike, owner search. All of them have this little generic search icon. These are search functions that I had actually saved previously. And how we did that was actually clicking on this customize search button. Now, the reason why I'm recommending doing the general query and then clicking on customize search is because if we did a new search, if we just choose this create new search option, it starts me off with a completely blank search, meaning it's not going to have the owner, it's not going to have any parts and pieces of the address, it's not going to have the subdivision search, counties, or the city search. It's just completely empty. So I would have to go through all of the different elements that we can search by and recheck any of the ones that I wanted. What I find is a little bit more preferable is instead of creating a new search, just go to the general query and then click on customize search. Now, when we get to the customized search for a general query, or if we chose to do the foreclosure query, it's still going to have that golden padlock. And you'll notice that over here on the right, I can't move any of these. Anytime I'm clicking on them, it's thinking that I'm just trying to select the text. Let me show you guys a trick. If we're on this golden padlock general query, and I add in, let's say, lot acres. As soon as I check the checkbox for this, it's no longer on the golden padlock. It's no longer showing the general query. It's now giving me the option to give this a name. And over here on the right, all of our options are open and even our checkboxes are now available to us. So if there was something that we wanted to get rid of, township range and section, for instance, we can just uncheck those checkboxes or click on the X over here on the right to get rid of anything that we don't want. Now, one thing that I might recommend, we ran a search earlier that actually showed us the 1500 to 1600 in Peoria, on Peoria. I'm going to go over to geography and let's actually add in a pre-directional and a post-directional. So the pre-direction I'm going to put before the street name, post-direction I'm going to put after the street suffix, and then I'm going to hit apply. Now, when we hit apply, what that does is it actually takes whatever those criteria were and adds them onto our search. So now I can come back here and I can do my is between. We'll do 1500 to 1600. I'm going to do South Peoria this time. And that's going to narrow down my search just to the stuff that was on the southern side of Peoria instead of showing me the ones that were in North and South Peoria. So some of these I think are actually really practical to add on. Um, if you guys do end up wanting to save a search for future usage, that's actually what this save button is for. So in my case, if I wanted to give this thing a name, I'm going to say full search, save it, and I'm good to go. Now, what this is actually going to allow me to do as well, we just got a question. Let me finish this, Raminta, and then I'll answer that question. But what we do as well is we can save between either a search template or a search template with values. So what that means is that if I save it as a search template, it's only going to remember all of the different criteria available. If I do search template with values, what that's going to do is it's actually going to save not just the criteria that I have made available, but also the criteria that I have saved in there. So for instance, if I actually saved this with the search template with values, it's going to remember this 1500 to 1600 South Peoria. That might not be what you're hoping for. So what I would recommend is if you guys do end up customizing a search, make sure that you're searching or saving it with the search template rather than the search template with values. Now, if you guys are always working in a specific area, like let's say that you guys are always working in a certain town or a certain zip code or whatever the case may be, you guys can come in, customize the search, and then save that so that you have those values already built in. So for instance, if I come down here to city and I'm always searching within Tulsa, I can customize my search. Where did it go? Oh, there's full search. I can save my full search like that. And then that way, the next time I come in into Realist, if I use this full search option, it'll remember those details for me. Now, if you guys do end up in a situation where you guys have created a custom search and you just want to get rid of it, just hit delete search. Easy. All right. So the question was, can Realist be used for other than residential properties? Is there a way to find out the mailing addresses for apartment complex units? Big apartment complex has several buildings, each has a different street address. Yes, it can. In fact, actually, I had a friend who just moved. I'm going to switch over to my general query. And wow, it's like I thought of it, slipped out of the back of my mind, and now I'm trying to remember where it is. 15th. Oh, actually, it's right here. So here we have our report that shows this particular property. That's one of the buildings. It's showing the address for only one of the buildings instead of all three of them. But when we click on this and click on the report button, number of buildings, 3. And sometimes if each building has its own data recorded, especially if you have a property that has multiple buildings on it, there may actually be something that says building 1, building 2, building 3. In this case, it looks like this particular property does not. Trying to think of another example. There was one actually up by where I used to live. Yeah, the apartment buildings are not always that great because it's not going to show the actual individual units information because the tax records really aren't concerned with that. But tax records are concerned with condos. Let me clear this off real quick. And there's some condos down south of ORU that we use as an example. There we go. So here's a condo area. This is actually where our former compliance director lived. But when you guys get to this one, there's going to be a link that's still missing here. Did they get rid of the button again? Oh my gosh. Man, we just got them to fix this and now it's not working again. But there is going to be an option, and actually I think it's for sure working if you guys get into Matrix. But let me get logged back in again since it's requiring this. Come on. There. Just so you guys are aware, there is always a backup of the public record search or tax record search on Matrix. And if you guys go to the map search for this, this is where you guys can find all of the condo information. So the apartment complexes, again, it's not really going to be too specific on those. But if you guys ever need to find condo information, if you load it up on Matrix and select one of these, it's going to present you with a massive list. It's kind of cumbersome to navigate. There used to be a button in Realist that would pop up underneath the, let me switch over to the full map view so we can actually see these. Whenever you guys are searching in Realist, there would be a second button down there that would allow you guys to see all of the tax records for all of the different owners and parts and pieces of the condominium. But for now, it looks like that button is missing again. So we're gonna have to see if we can find a way to get that back added again. But yeah, unfortunately with the apartment complexes, it's really gonna depend on how they have it, how they have the tax records put in. I'm gonna have to do some more research on that. If I find more information about that, I'll let you know. But all right, so back to our map. Now, so far what we've been doing is messing with the searches and saving the searches, and changing the criteria on here. But let's say that I actually just want to focus on just doing a search with just the map. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to contract the search bar over here, just collapse it onto the side. If I need to get back to it, I can always click on this little magnifying glass. But I'm actually going to zoom in here, and we're going to take a look at the drawing tools. We have a radius, rectangle, and polygon tool. Radius tool is fairly simple. Click and drag, it makes a circle. Rectangle tool, same thing, click and drag, makes a rectangle. The polygon tool, on the other hand, is going to be kind of like, think about this like pins and string. So I put a pin, I've got my string, I put another pin, the string solidifies in between these, and I can kind of draw my shape the way that I want it to be. So if there's an unusual shape that you guys are trying to search within, or if your client has their own definition of where they want to search by, you guys can oblige those by just using the polygon tool. And if they need to make any adjustments, click on the edges of the shapes, or you can even click on the little kind of faint dot in the middle there and change the search there. Now, interestingly enough, as we start adding these shapes onto the search, you can click on them and delete them. You can click on them and just search within that area. But if we pull up our search bar again, you'll notice that our map tools applied is actually going to be treated like criteria that's restricting all of the other search information. So if you had a certain search area that you wanted to search for, you guys could actually outline that area and then add in any of the other details. So like maybe you forgot what the exact address was for a specific person, you can draw the shape around the subdivision, put in their name, and find their address. But I'm going to close both of those out. We also have the layers. You can add in these different boundaries on here. I did want to point out, whenever we're adding in any boundaries or any of these other details, there is a limit. So down here at the bottom, you may have noticed that limit was popping up in a couple other places, but effectively this is just saying you can only add so much detail to the map at the same time. If I check all of these at once, you'll see exactly the reason why they have a limit on exactly how much you can put on the screen, because it gets overwhelmingly cluttered. It's just way too much. So, uh, but it could be handy, especially the flood zone option. Just so you guys are aware, Matrix has recently added in a boundary that's the Tulsa flood zone. So if you guys are working in Tulsa County, they have a separate flood zone that's more locally made. So always buy local, right? Um, we also have a little properties and sale button. This is where we can add on little dots on the map to see what's in pre-foreclosure, the Liz pendant status, the auction, bank-owned REO or bank-owned REO sales. Check those check boxes to add the dots to the map. If there are any, I mean, that's actually good. I'm glad that we're not seeing too many of them. I might have to zoom in for them to start popping up. Yeah, there they are. Kind of gave my map hives. Um, we also have the option add in sales values, or excuse me, not sales values, uh, the tax sales. When you check this checkbox, it's going to put in all of the dots on the map that are tax sales, and you can change what the months were. So like how far back you want to go. You can also combine this with the MLS status. So for instance, if you guys did end up wanting to show the uh, MLS status as well as what's been sold, you can see which ones are overlapping, which indicates that not only did it show that it was sold in the MLS, but it also has the tax record updated. We've got the different trends going on. You can break this down by the median sales price, real activity, so on and so forth. I'd recommend playing with this at your leisure. Just remember that that median sales price may be thrown off if the particular area that you're working in does not have a lot of activity. This is a fun game to play, is to go out into the middle of quote unquote nowhere and see these areas where we have like this particular zip code had a median sales price of $1.6 million. But if we switch this over to the data layer that shows the sales activity, we can see that there was only one property that sold in this area. Oh, four, excuse me. We actually had four. So apparently some really big properties sold in that area that the median was even thrown off. But there's a points of interest option. You've got a directions option. Fun fact about the directions as well as the locate on map option. These can actually use tax parcel numbers. So if you type in a parcel number, put in the city and state, you're good to go. It'll find it for you. Makes it really easy to track down some of those vacant land properties, so you guys don't have to worry about, actually getting real directions from the client whenever they're like, well, it's just down the road past the second stop sign. All right, well, okay. I can't put that in my GPS though. But beyond that, that's about it for Matrix, or for Realist, excuse me. There's some customization that you guys can do to your layout on here if you guys want to make any changes to that. But please play with the system. You're not going to break it. And if you guys do end up in a situation where you're not familiar with something or just have questions in general, just give us a call over at the service desk and we can help you out. I'm going to have our phone number up on the screen, but we are done for class today. I'm going to leave the session open for a little bit longer if you guys do have any questions, but if you guys would like, get in contact with us at the service desk and we can help you out. Thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully I'll see you guys in our rules and regs class a little bit later today or in some future class in the future. Future class in the future.